Okay, it is a couple minutes past the hour, so let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone to another installment of the Public Policy and Advocacy webinar series from the National Brain Tumor Society. This webinar is our 2018 Advocacy Roundup. Let's celebrate our advocacy successes this year and chat about the real-world implications of the work that we do. I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through before we begin. First, to minimize background noise, we will have all webinar participants muted when they join. However, we do want this to be an interactive webinar, so please ask any questions you may have by utilizing the chat feature on your Zoom screen. I'm going to send a chat right now to let you know where to find the chat feature. It will pop up on your Zoom screen, and you'll be able to chat during the call anytime, and we'll do our best to answer all questions following the main presentation during our Q&A session. If your question is not answered or if we miss it during the webinar, please do email us at advocacy@braintumor.org. We want to make sure that all of your questions get answered. We're also recording this webinar, so it will be accessible online within a handful of days, and we'll also email a link to follow up with the video to all of our advocates. My name is Casey Troy Ribnick, and I'm your partner in grassroots advocacy here at the National Brain Tumor Society. Joining me on this webinar today are my public policy and advocacy colleagues, Lisa Peabody, our public policy associate, and Lainey Titus-Samont, our director of advocacy. We're also delighted to be joined by a special guest, Dana Richter, who is the legislative assistant for West Virginia's Senator Shelley Moore Capito. Senator Capito was an original sponsor of the Childhood Cancer STAR Act. Sorry, let me just. So before we go into detail about the advancements we've made to support the brain tumor community, we want to start by saying thank you. Every success you'll hear about from our team during this webinar is because of the dedication and perseverance of you and other brain tumor advocates from across the United States. You did this, and we are proud to work alongside you in our fight to make changes that benefit the entire brain tumor community. So this year, you have sent over 3,000 messages to our members of Congress through our online action alerts. And that's not to mention the individual direct messages you've sent to your members of Congress or their staff. We've had at least 225 in-person meetings during Head to the Hill and in-district meetings throughout the year. And there are over 1,100 advocates who took action this year. That's through sending an email, calling members of Congress, attending Head to the Hill, or attending an in-district meeting. That is awesome. We are quite a community. Head to the Hill was once again a great opportunity to join together with other members of the brain tumor community. The quote here is from one of our attendees this year. Head to the Hill empowers you to tell your story, and it's the one place where it's understood by everyone around you. There is instant kinship and support. Not only do participants get to tell their story to members of Congress and affect public policy, which is our ultimate goal, but they also have the chance to be in a place of kinship and support, as this participant said. In addition to interpersonal benefits, this year we added a new welcome reception in downtown Washington, D.C. on the rooftop of the law firm of one of our generous board members, Chandri Navarro. We again partnered with CERN, the Collaborative Ependymoma Research Network, for their butterfly release. It was a beautiful evening to kick off Head to the Hill on Sunday following Race for Hope DC. We also hosted a new breakfast program on Capitol Hill in one of the Senate buildings with guest speakers that included Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Senator Van Hollen of Maryland, plus a friend of the National Brain Tumor Society, brain tumor survivor, and NASCAR driver, Matt Tift. It was an uplifting and encouraging way to start our day advocating for the brain tumor community on Capitol Hill. All of this contributed to our successes this year, and my colleague, Lisa Peabody, will set us up to hear from our special guest, Dana Richter, about the STAR Act.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. So glad you could be here today and made time for this webinar today. So let's talk about what we accomplished this year. First, let's talk about the Childhood Cancer Star Act. It was a great act that we got accomplished in a very short time. So this bill was introduced in 2015, and it crossed the finish line in 2018 in 3.5 years. And that seems like a long time, but for a bill, that's a pretty great accomplishment. The average is about 5 years. And not only did we get it across the finish line and passed, but we also got funding for the Childhood Cancer Star Act. So 2 wins there. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the STAR Act and where it came from. So advocacy, pediatric cancer groups across the country all would come to Capitol Hill and talk about what their needs were. And if you have so many, the members all agreed that childhood cancer is an important issue that needed to be addressed. But when you have so many people asking in so many different ways for so many different things, it kind of left them in a place nowhere to go. And I kind of look at that like when you were a kid, or when your kids are in the car with you and they say, let's get ice cream, and your dad says, oh, okay, let's get ice cream, and then someone says, I want Ben and Jerry's, and I want Dairy Queen, and I want Baskin Robbins. And then your dad says, I'm not negotiating that. I don't know where to go for ice cream. But if everyone says, oh, let's go to Dairy Queen, it's an easier yes for your dad. And that same kind of principle of getting the whole childhood cancer community to collaborate on one message really helped this bill and really made it a priority for members. The second part that was very historic about this act is that, as I mentioned, so many cancer organizations, over 130 pediatric cancer organizations, had input into this bill. And so it made the bill really large and means that it's affecting many areas of pediatric cancer, and a very comprehensive piece of legislation. Also, because there was so much in it and so many needs met for so many organizations, that resulted in huge support on Capitol Hill, and especially bipartisan support. I mean, everyone wants to help pediatric cancer patients. And because we came with this one message, and this message was very bold, it really moved things forward. You might remember that in the House of Representatives, there are 435 members, and we had 371 of them co-sponsor. That's 80% of the House. And so I'll remind you that a co-sponsor is a member who has agreed to support the bill and actually signs on to it. So we had 85% of the members signing on even before it was brought to the floor. And in the Senate, we have 100 senators, and we had 55% or 55 senators agreeing to sign on as co-sponsors. So even with all of this effort from the community, we still need to have an in Capitol Hill, because we still need an office to lead a piece of legislation so that it's shared with other members, and so that they can also advocate it to other members. And so one of those leaders was Senator Shelley Moore Capito's office, and we mentioned Dana Richter, and Dana Richter is just she's a star negotiator, and her role was to make sure that this bill, that the Childhood Cancer Star Act, continually got to the top of the pile in other offices. And also she did a great job of sort of tweaking the bill and making the language palatable to everyone across party lines. And so before Dana was the legislative assistant to Senator Capito, she was the director of government relations for the National Breast Cancer Coalition, and then worked with Representative Frank LoBiondo of New Jersey as the senior legislative assistant. And on top of all that, she has her law degree from University of Alabama. So we welcome Dana Richter.
I just need to unmute. There we go. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here, and I know my boss and I would like to echo the thanks to all of the advocates for their work. because while we play a role, we by no means can do it alone. And the willingness of all of you to come to the Hill to share your stories, which I know is not an easy thing to do, and to make your members of Congress in both the House and the Senate understand why this is important, is the reason that we were able to get this bill passed into law. And so thank you so much. My first slide really deals with the background of the STAR Act, because a lot of people are curious as to why do members decide to become a sponsor or co-sponsor of one bill as opposed to, right now there's about 5,000 bills in the Senate. So what causes them? Well, part of thing, just to give you a little background on my boss, Shelley Capito from West Virginia, joined the Senate about 4 years ago. Before that, she was in the House of Representatives for 14 years. So she had the opportunity, both in her time in the House and the Senate, as well as she was in the State House in West Virginia, to hear from a lot of great advocates who shared their stories about their experience with cancer, whether it was their cancer, their child's cancer, or a loved one's cancer. And it really educated her on the different aspects of cancer, whether it was, coverage for treatment, whether it was survivorship issues. And so when Senator Reid approached her and Senator Reid's staff, Jill is the me for Senator Reid, Jill Boland, and she is fabulous. This was something that the Senator was very interested in. And on top of that, the subtitle A of the bill is titled the Carolyn Price Walker Conquer Childhood Cancer Reauthorization Act. Carolyn Price Walker was the daughter of Deborah Price, who was a congresswoman Senator Capito served with in the House of Representatives. Deborah Price was from Ohio. She was actually the Republican conference chairwoman and was part of Republican leadership, and the senator worked very closely with her. Carolyn Price Walker was her daughter, who unfortunately passed away at age 9 from neuroblastoma. And so this is something that the senator was aware of. She spoke to Representative Price about this, and the act was first passed in 2008 with broad bipartisan support and was reauthorized as part of the STAR Act. So that was her, besides her understanding over the years from the great work of advocates in West Virginia and around the country, that was one of the things that made this very personal to her and really made this a fight she was very willing to take. And it was a fight. Every bill, to get it over the finish line and to make your bill stand out, it requires, a fight for both the member and the staff. On a staff level, as Lisa said, I spent 5 years working with the National Breast Cancer Coalition. So was very aware of a lot of the issue that cancer patients face. So on a personal level, I was very happy to be able to take on this challenge. The next slide, the next thing I want to talk about is really about the provisions of the STAR Act and why this is so important. As Lisa said, this was a great effort by all of the groups to come together and identify what needed to be done. And one of the most important things was to expand opportunities for childhood cancer research. The goal that was identified was that you needed to maximize discovery and accelerate development and availability of promising childhood cancer treatments. This was another thing that my boss strongly supports medical research. We work very, very closely. She is a member of the Appropriations Committee. We work very closely on ensuring funding for medical research. And so coming from a state, West Virginia only has 1.8, 1.7 million people. And so ensuring that that there's research being done on a national level is so important because it's not always being done in the state, although we do have research going on. And additionally, it's just important that childhood cancer gets this recognition and the need for research, because while every single case of childhood cancer is earth-shattering for the family, the relatively small population of children with cancer and the geographic distance between these children makes researching childhood cancer difficult. So one of the first things that the STAR Act does is expands efforts to collect biospecimens for children, for childhood cancer patients, so that they can be studied and they can look for commonalities and really look at ways to get a database going so that childhood cancer can be researched in the best possible ways, and we can reach the best possible outcomes and have new treatments, and just new understanding about the disease. So that's one of the main things that the STAR Act does. Another thing that it does is it looks at incidences. It would authorize grants to state cancer registries to identify and track incidences of child, adolescent, and young adult cancers. And it was really important that we specifically made sure that all of these different groups, both children, adolescents, and young adults, were covered. Because one thing we hear from different people, different groups in the community, sometimes adolescents feel like that, you know, they're not being looked at. So we wanted to make sure that all, and young adult cancer survivors feel like they're sometimes caught between children and adult cancers, and they're sometimes not given, they sometimes, I've heard, don't feel like they're given the attention that they feel that needs to be given. So we want to make sure everyone was covered. And this funding is going to be used to train people how to, you know, make sure that the information being put into these registries is the best possible information, to set up the infrastructure to create these registries, and support the collection of cases into a national childhood cancer registry. And once again, for a small state like West Virginia and a number of other small states, this is incredibly important, because this helps identify clinical trials that are going on and other opportunities that children in states that might not have as ambitious or as comprehensive research network, they're able to tap into the wonderful work that's been going on around the country. Another aspect of the bill is improving the quality of life for childhood cancer survivors. And this is something that we have some very active childhood cancer survivors in West Virginia who have done a great job of educating my boss and I on the needs and how this is, as more and more children survive cancer, which is our goal, they have unique needs. And so these things need to be researched. And I was saying, we had one who was telling us that he needed to see a cardiologist when he was 18 because of some of the after effects of his treatment. But both the insurance company and some of the doctors he was calling were saying, you're 18, why do you need to see a cardiologist? So making sure that both the medical community, the insurance companies, they're all educated on this, and then just researching into, as we have great therapies and more great therapies emerge, just to make sure that, that as the long-term consequences are looked at, that research continues to be done and these children continue to, as they grow into adulthood, that the impacts of their cancers and treatments are looked at. And it establishes a new pilot program to begin to explore innovative models to care for childhood cancer survivors. So really looking that it's a framework from when they receive their treatment throughout their lifetime. As Lisa also said regarding next steps, really looking at one of the first things my boss, as I mentioned, my boss is on the Appropriations Committee, which provides funding for bills. And one of the things she was really concerned with was that it was wonderful it passed, but it was kind of, because it passed, let's see, back in March, April, we were well into the fiscal 19 appropriation cycle. And so we wanted to make sure, in fact, we were so far along that the House had already passed their bill, or was already working on their bill in the final stages. And so it was incredibly important to her that that we made sure that there was no lag between when the bill was passed and when they could start this work. And so fortunately, due to the advocates' great work, Senator Blunt, who is the chairman of the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Committee, is also a co-sponsor of the STAR Act and was very aware of how important it was to get this bill funded as soon as possible and get this work going. And him and his staff were very helpful. And it was fully funded in the fiscal year 19 Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Act, which was passed and signed into law at the end of September. Of course, every Appropriations Act, as you may know, is for 1 year. So we got things up and going. We will continue to support this. We will ensure, but we're going to need your help as well to make sure that this funding continues, and we get all of the potential of this bill funded, and it's able to see its full potential. And then the final step is the impact of the bill. And I think some of that is unknown. Obviously, we want to see some new treatments coming out. We want to see this work on survivorship. We want to see a robust state and national cancer registry. One of the other aspects of the bill that we thought was important to include was the inclusion of at least one pediatric oncologist on the National Cancer Advisory Board. And so the bill includes that requirement. Because, one thing we kept hearing, and I keep hearing, is that children aren't simply little adults. They have unique, their bodies are unique and their cancers are unique. And so these are things that we really need people with the expertise there, and reminding folks of that. My boss recently did a fabulous event at West Virginia University and about the STAR Act, and worked with one of our doctors there. And she was talking to him about that, and she asked him about the impact of this bill. And what he had to say was that pediatric cancer research is not nearly as well funded as adult cancer research. So we need many more treatments and options for my patients. And he saw the STAR Act as the way we were going to get there. And so that's our goal. We want as many options as possible until we can cure cancer, cure childhood cancer. We want to make sure that there's as much as possible. So please know that we will continue our work. We ask you that you continue your efforts because they are making a difference, and just thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dana. I love to hear all those stories of how Senator Capito is personally invested, and we know that personal investment really goes a long way. So thank you so much for coming. Just an aside, Dana, I don't know if you remember how we met, but before I worked for the National Brain Tumor Society, I was a mom on a mission, and I met with offices outside of my district, and I took on the STAR Act because I thought it was a good piece of legislation. And even without the backing of an organization and without being constituent, I reached out to Senator Capito's office, and that's where I met Dana. And she took the time to meet with me and really connected, and we've developed a relationship since then. Just shows another side of her character as well as her skills. So thanks again, Dana, for coming.
Oh, thank you. And I definitely do remember. I remember the first time we met in the conference room I'm in right now.
Yes. That's so nice. All right. Well, thanks again, Dana. So let me talk a little bit about what happens next for STAR in terms of our advocacy. We'll be making sure that we every year get to the top of the pile of the appropriations group and continuing to work with Senator Capito's office, because the bill is authorized for 5 years. So we've already got funding for 2019, and each year we'll have to again advocate for funding. The other piece that's going on behind the scenes is that the Alliance for Childhood Cancer has created a task force, and this task force invited people who are connected to to pediatric cancer from all different cancer diseases, including researchers and scientists and patients and caregivers, to sort of help create some recommendations for the NCI. So the National Cancer Institute is the government organization that's going to be implementing STAR. And we wanted to make sure that they heard some of the ideas that we had and learned from our experience so that the implementation could be smooth and they could have our input. So we're still working on that task force with the National Cancer Institute. So let's move on to some to our other successes this year. Another big part of our agenda that we brought to Capitol Hill in 2018 was increased medical research funding. So the government is the largest funder of brain tumor research. It's an important piece of moving treatments forward because of the money that's involved in their budget. And I look at this increase in medical research funding, I kind of compare it to a pizza. So if you have a pizza and it's a small pizza and you divide that up into 8 slices, then each area only gets a small amount of pizza. But if we increase the pizza size and we increase medical research funding, then every organization, and I mean every facet of the government gets a larger piece and more money. So we want to keep that in mind. So the 3 areas that we worked on this year were increases to the National Institutes of Health budget, National Cancer Institute increase, and also the peer-reviewed cancer research program. So let's talk a little bit about each of those institutions. So this is the National Institutes of Health. And, you know, another piece that happened this year was that we have been sharing with Congress about the value of finishing the budget on time. And so that researchers know that as soon as their budget ends, they already know what their budget will be for the following year. And it's really important for researchers. They need to know what investment they should be making in their project. Can they hire a new lab tech? Can they start this next protocol? Are they going to have the money for it? And for the past 22 years, the budget has been late. And this year, with all of the advocacy and all of the reminders, Congress did a great, took all that to heart and actually finished the budget on time for the first year in 22 years. And that's really going to have an impact on research and the success of research. So in terms of the increases for the National Institute of Health, we did increase it by $2 billion, which is a great, great asset. And from there, we were able to fund some of these initiatives within that $2 billion. We continue to move the 21st Century Cures initiative forward. And you can remember that was a piece of legislation that helped to bring technology, artificial intelligence, innovation to research, and also will fund the National Cancer Moonshot. And that was that program that's being led by former Vice President Biden and is hoping to accelerate the pace at which treatments get to the patient. So next, in our next initiative, we also worked to make sure that the National Cancer Institute also got an increase. And you see that we did get an increase from them for a $186.9 million. And, you know, I haven't even said it enough how important it is that we remember that these increases are based so much on the advocacy work that you're doing. Hearing from you, getting action alerts, coming to Head to the Hill, all of those efforts, is what is making this a priority. So, you know, I can't even say it enough. So I'm going to say it one more time. So we did get that increase for the National Cancer Institute from your efforts. And we, us and along with some other brain tumor groups sort of worked together in an advocacy project, sort of an internal advocacy project, working directly with Dr. Ned Sharpless, the director of NCI. And we've gotten them to agree to a program, a collaborative program in new adult brain cancer research and new pediatric brain cancer research. It's the first of its kind. So really excited about that end result. And that is going to be a program funded at $4 million, really something special. So next, let's talk about our peer-reviewed cancer research program. So that program is in the Department of Defense's budget. I know that kind of sounds strange that the Department of Defense has medical research, but it started a medical research funding a while back to focus on diseases specific to our military in combat. And that program has since expanded and includes many diseases that affect members of the military and their families. And within that medical research funding budget is a smaller program called the Peer Reviewed Cancer Research Program. And we're in that group. And this year, with your advocacy, we did increase the appropriations for that program, the PRCRP, by 10 million. And we also made sure that the categories of research that are interesting to that we have interest in were included, including pediatric brain tumors and adult cancer. So let me show you this pretty cool chart that sort of outlines the program in terms of its appropriation. So this is for the PRCRP appropriations. NBTS got involved in 2016. That's when you started to participate in advocacy, and the program was at 50 million, and now coming into 2019 for next year, we're going to be at almost double that at 90 million. That's a tremendous accomplishment, almost doubled. So what does that mean for our patients? What does that mean in terms of grant rewards? So since 2009, and that's when the PRCRP started, there have been over $19 million awarded specifically for research in pediatric brain tumors and brain cancer combined. $19 million. So when I say that the government is the largest funder of brain tumor research, here is a prime example. And along with that $19 million were 211 individual brain tumor projects. So let's talk a little more about specifically the brain tumor research awards. Got another graph that shows this. And so I take a look at the end of the graph where you see the two tall blue towers. In 2016, NBTS started an outreach program. We decided, let's let researchers know, let's get an awareness campaign and share information about these PRCRP opportunities so that we have an influx of loads and loads of applications. And you can see this big jump in 2016, all the way up to $4 million of grants that were funded. That's because of the large influx of applications. And then we see an even bigger jump when we continued that program in 2017. And the other thing that happened between 2016 and 2017 is up until 2016, we only had pediatric brain tumors as part of the PRCRP. And in 2017, we added a second category. So now in our program, we have pediatric brain tumors and adult brain cancer. So we've really got the whole spectrum. And if you're looking at 2015, you see the funding is zero. And so that's kind of interesting too. That was the year that we got involved. We had a champion on Capitol Hill, and he was a congressman, and he had been the person who had made sure that pediatric brain tumors were included, and he passed away that year. So we lost our champion. That really kicked us into gear to make sure that we were a loud voice and came back in full force. So let's see what else that NBTS does to support the PRCR program. So I did explain how we provide information to researchers to keep them motivated and to show that this funding is out there. You know, it's hard for them to learn that there is this opportunity. And second is a program that Casey works on. So these applications are all evaluated through a program with the Department of Defense. All of the applications for the PRCRP awards, and they're evaluated by clinicians and scientists and researchers. But the Department of Defense likes to also include people who are personally connected to brain tumors, caregivers, survivors. And so we partner with them to make recommendations and to nominate and to make suggestions about possible people who could sit on this review board. And these are non-scientists, these are advocates just like you who get to participate in the evaluation process. So we put all that together, and we have a lot of successes in medical research funding for 2018. So Casey's going to talk about some other items that we've worked on this year. Casey?
Thanks so much, Lisa. We've seen quite an impressive showing and turnout for our medical research funding, so it's exciting to hear more details about it. Thank you. So we have a few other accomplishments we should mention today, and our community really celebrated Brain Tumor Awareness Month this year, which is May of every year. On May 24th, Brain Tumor Awareness Month was recognized by the Senate. We had several supporting senators that made sure that May was acknowledged and awareness was raised during the Brain Tumor Awareness Month. And then National Brain Tumor Society also hosted during Brain Tumor Awareness Month a congressional briefing. So this was a first of its kind event for the brain tumor community, hosted on Capitol Hill with the goal of raising awareness and educating our members of Congress about brain tumors. The congressional briefing was widely supported and attended by many members of Congress and their staff. There was a standing room, this was a standing room only event during which leaders in the brain tumor community, including researchers, advocates, and survivors, informed Congress of the experience of living with a brain tumor, the quest to develop new and more effective treatments for patients, and informed Congress about how they might foster future progress. So as you can see, the National Brain Tumor Society and the entire brain tumor community had a banner year and saw great strides taken toward advancing research to find better treatments and a cure for brain tumors. The STAR Act was passed and is a law. We saw increases to medical research funding through the NIH, NCI, and PRCRP, and we saw raised awareness during Brain Tumor Awareness Month with the Senate resolution to acknowledge Brain Tumor Awareness Month. And looking forward to 2019, we are currently reviewing current and upcoming legislation. We know brain tumor patients and survivors face various challenges, and we are working on addressing and improving those challenges through our brain tumor advocacy. We will aim to create change in the following issues: barriers to clinical trial enrollment, increasing availability of palliative care, and access to treatment. So stay tuned for more on these topics in the coming months. And a side note, if you want to be involved and haven't done so already, be sure to go sign up to become an advocate, and you'll receive our legislative updates and calls to action at the webpage listed on this slide. It is braintumor.org/advocacy. You can also see our current action alerts on the alerts, polls, and updates page within that overall page, and view previous educational webinars on our tools and trainings page. And I also wanted to mention, since I neglected to do so when I was talking about Head to the Hill, we are already planning for Head to the Hill 2019. So save the date for Head to the Hill if you are interested in traveling to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the brain tumor community with your members of Congress. It's May 5th through 7th in Washington, D.C., and we'll have registration open in January. You will be hearing more from us about the program for Head to the Hill 2019 soon, so keep your eye out for that information as well. So now we'll post this recording to YouTube, and we'll share the video via email to our advocates in the coming days. But now let's move on to the Q&A section of the webinar. Lisa, do we have any questions that came in during the webinar so far?
Hi, Casey. I don't see any questions. Your chat box is down at the bottom right if anyone would like to send a question via chat.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we can hold on for a couple minutes in case you'd like to chat a question now. And Lainey just sent a message, making sure you can see that chat box. Sean, thanks for the note. He said, such good information. Thank you so much for all your efforts. Thank you. This is definitely not an individual. We don't do this one-sided. We rely on advocates like you. So thank you so much for all the work you've done and for joining us today.
So Casey, Georgina has a question about getting to preventions rather than a cure and setting up protocols. And I'm not sure if Lainey has information. I do know that CDC does a lot of that collecting of information about where cancer is, where brain cancer is, but in terms of setting up protocols for prevention, it's something we could look into unless someone has some information.
Yeah, I mean, this is Lainey. I'm the director of advocacy. So there hasn't been a ton of research suggesting there's preventative measures for brain tumors. But Georgina, you can definitely reach out to us. If I know you said that you can explain a bit more. So if you want to send a note to Casey, then we can definitely set up a call and go over that with you if you'd like.
Thanks, Lainey. I was chatting with Georgina privately earlier. She had a question, and so I sent the email address. It's advocacy@braintumor.org, and we're always open to having conversations. Yeah, Georgina, let's, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, let's chat more about this and your experience, and awesome. I said, no problem. Perfect. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think that's it. So once again, thank you so, oops, I ended the slideshow. Thank you so much for joining us on this live web training to talk about our advocacy successes and looking forward to 2019. Again, visit our website at braintumor.org/advocacy, and we hope to see you in an event soon, or at least continue advocating for the brain tumor community alongside you. Thank you.